there came a time when we were wanting to switch from the mission to the local churches to let them do everything that we had been doing. And along at that time was when I met Glenn and Verna Schwartz. Right about 1990, we had a move that the churches should establish their own constitution. They should take over all the functions that we had been doing as missionaries. We would then become advisors or consultants for them. We would help them with leadership training in particular, which even up to now we're still doing. And we had some questions about how to go about this changeover. One of our African leaders was named Matthew Mpofu. He told me about some papers that he had from Glenn Schwartz, and he showed these papers about indigeneity, indigenous church principles. And I read those and I understood them, and I certainly accepted them. So when Glenn and Verna came to town, we invited them to stay with us. We talked to them about our churches, and in particular we talked about what would be the future of the mission. That is the organization that my colleague and I had worked out. And what would be the future of an old folks home that we had established, because that was the only institution we had established. We had avoided institutions altogether in favor of just church planting and leadership training. And Glenn gave us some excellent advice that we followed, and that was, first of all, that the mission should die and let the church be born. And that's exactly what we did. We followed that procedure. We said that the church will die, the missionaries will have no formal position in the new churches. The churches themselves will be self-governing, and they will have their own constitution, and the mission will not dictate anything to them. They'll make their own decisions. Secondly, on the old folks home, we followed his advice that the old folks home should be separated off as a totally separate nonprofit charitable organization. And that's exactly what happened. The old folks home owned a farm that was under our mission. The farm was very small and not particularly productive as a farm, but it was ideal for these old folks. Up to about 15 old people could live there and live out their days in a peaceful rural setting, just like an African village. They could grow their own crops. And so we then moved this old folks home over into a charitable trust, which it still is under, and the old folks home is still continuing. And we thank God it has never been a source of conflict for the churches. The churches might have liked to use that property for building other things, but it was never even contemplated from day one, because we got good advice right at a transitional point. So the old folks home is continuing to function, but it is not affiliated with the churches in any way, and they never have to have business meetings about the farm or about the old folks home, because it's completely independent. So really what we turned over then to the Africans was just churches. That's all they had to concern themselves about. They had only pastoral issues. There were not big financial issues involved. We had managed to avoid a lot of that. Now that doesn't mean that we had avoided dependency altogether. As much as we knew about avoiding dependency in the churches, we still managed to create some dependency many times. The nation of Zimbabwe and Southern Africa in general, it seems to be very, very difficult to avoid dependency totally. And we discovered that, and I realized that this was a big, big issue that Glenn Schwartz had brought up to my attention. And so from that point on, from having met Glenn and Verna, from having worked through the practical issues with our own churches, I started to realize that this was such an important issue that I needed to dedicate more time and energy to it.